October 12, 1944, eastern France, approximately 9 kilometers west of the Vosges Mountains. 4 men lay motionless in tall grass. They were American soldiers. Each carried an M1 Garand rifle. One man had binoculars pressed to his eyes. Another held a compass and a folded map. The other 2 faced opposite directions, covering the approaches. Their uniforms were damp from morning dew. No one spoke. The grass extended for 30 meters in all directions before giving way to scattered trees and low brush. Beyond that, a ridgeline rose gradually toward the east. Visibility was approximately 400 meters. The sky was overcast. Temperature was cool. There was no wind. The man with the binoculars had been observing the ridgeline for 11 minutes. He had not moved the binoculars. He had not blinked. His breathing was controlled and shallow. At 0434 hours, he lowered the binoculars slowly. He did not turn his head. He did not signal. He placed the binoculars on the ground beside him and remained still. The other 3 men did not react. They maintained their positions. No questions were asked. The ridgeline remained quiet. No movement was visible. No sounds carried across the distance. The 4-man team was a reconnaissance patrol from Company E, 2nd Battalion, 7th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division. They had departed their company position at 445 hours with orders to conduct forward reconnaissance along a suspected German defensive line. The patrol leader was a staff sergeant with experience in Italy and southern France. The other 3 men were riflemen, all with at least 4 months of frontline service. Their mission was to identify enemy positions, estimate strength, and report back by 1200 hours. They were instructed to avoid contact. Rules of engagement were explicit: observe only. Do not fire unless fired upon. Withdraw if detected. The patrol carried no radio. Communication would occur upon return to friendly lines. The terrain was rolling farmland transitioning to forested hills. The area had been contested for 3 days. German forces had withdrawn from the immediate sector on October 10, but the extent and direction of their withdrawal were unclear. Division intelligence estimated that a new defensive line had been established somewhere between the current American positions and the Vosges foothills. The location and strength of this line were unknown. The patrol had moved east for approximately 3 kilometers without encountering resistance. They had passed through 2 abandoned villages. Both showed signs of recent German occupation: discarded equipment, empty ration tins, vehicle tracks in the mud. The tracks were less than 12 hours old. At 0420 hours, the patrol had reached the edge of the open ground and taken up an observation position. The staff sergeant had selected the position because it offered concealment and a clear view of the ridgeline. The ridgeline was the most likely location for a defensive position. The slope provided a natural advantage. The reverse slope would allow concealment of troops and equipment. Standard German doctrine favored such positions. The patrol had observed the ridgeline for 14 minutes. No movement had been detected. No structures were visible. No smoke, no noise, no reflection of light on metal or glass. Reconnaissance doctrine in the U.S. Army in 1944 emphasized stealth and information gathering. Patrols were trained to move quietly, observe carefully, and withdraw before detection. Engagements were to be avoided. The value of intelligence outweighed the value of enemy casualties. A patrol that returned with accurate information was considered successful. A patrol that made contact but obtained no useful intelligence was considered a failure. The staff sergeant had led 9 reconnaissance patrols since landing in southern France in August. 7 had been completed without incident. 1 had resulted in brief small arms fire from a distance. The patrol had withdrawn and reported the enemy location. 1 had encountered a minefield. The patrol had marked the location and returned. In all cases, the primary objective had been achieved: accurate reporting of enemy positions or obstacles. Standard procedure required the patrol to advance until enemy positions were identified or until the time limit for the mission was reached. If no enemy positions were found, the patrol was expected to continue forward until contact was likely or terrain prevented further observation. The current position offered excellent observation. The next covered position was approximately 200 meters forward, at the tree line. Beyond that, the ground rose toward the ridgeline with minimal concealment. The staff sergeant had been trained to recognize signs of enemy presence: freshly disturbed earth, cut vegetation, worn paths, reflection of optical equipment, movement of sentries, sound of engines, voices or equipment, smoke from cooking fires or vehicles. He had been instructed to spend at least 15 minutes observing any suspected position before advancing. He had seen none of these signs. The ridgeline appeared vacant. The grass on the slope was undisturbed. No paths were visible. No fortifications were evident. The position met all criteria for a clear objective. The patrol's next step, according to doctrine, was to advance to the tree line, observe again, and then move closer to confirm that the ridgeline was unoccupied. The 3 riflemen expected this order. They had participated in similar patrols. The pattern was consistent: observe, advance, confirm, withdraw. The absence of visible enemy presence was a positive indicator. It suggested that the German line had been established farther east, possibly at the base of the mountains. At 04:35 hours, the staff sergeant turned his head slowly to the left. He looked at the rifleman holding the map. The rifleman met his eyes. The staff sergeant did not speak. He did not gesture. He held the rifleman's gaze for 3 seconds. The rifleman's expression did not change. He nodded once, barely perceptible. The staff sergeant turned his head back to face the ridgeline. He picked up his rifle. He did not chamber around. He did not stand. He remained prone in the grass. The other 2 riflemen glanced at each other. Neither spoke. They remained in position, facing outward. The staff sergeant did not give the order to advance. 15 seconds passed. 30 seconds. 1 minute. The patrol did not move. At 04:37 hours, the rifleman with the compass shifted slightly. His movement was minimal. A slight adjustment of his leg, a repositioning of his elbow. He did not look at the staff sergeant. He continued to scan the tree line to the south. At 04:39 hours, the second rifleman, positioned to cover the rear, turned his head briefly toward the staff sergeant. The staff sergeant did not acknowledge him. The rifleman turned back to his assigned sector. At 04:41 hours, the staff sergeant raised the binoculars again. He scanned the ridgeline from left to right, slowly and methodically. He paused at the center of the ridgeline for 10 seconds, then continued scanning to the right. He lowered the binoculars. He placed them on the ground. He did not speak. At 04:43 hours, the rifleman with the map unfolded it slightly. He studied it for several seconds, then folded it again. He glanced at the staff sergeant. The staff sergeant was looking at the ridgeline. The rifleman said nothing. At 04:45 hours, a bird flew across the open ground from the west, passed overhead, and continued east toward the ridgeline. The four men watched it. It landed in the grass approximately 150 meters away. It remained visible for a few seconds, then took flight again and disappeared beyond the ridgeline. No reaction occurred on the ridgeline. No movement, no sound. At 04:47 hours, the staff sergeant adjusted his grip on his rifle. He did not raise it. He did not move from his prone position. His eyes remained fixed on the ridgeline. At 04:49 hours, the rifleman covering the rear whispered, "Sergeant." His voice was barely audible. The staff sergeant did not turn. He did not respond. The rifleman did not repeat the word. At 04:51 hours, clouds shifted. A patch of sunlight moved across the slope below the ridgeline. The grass lightened in color. Shadows appeared and shifted as the light moved. No other change occurred. The staff sergeant watched the sunlight cross the slope and fade as the clouds closed again. The patrol remained motionless. The staff sergeant had seen the ridgeline before. Not this specific ridgeline, but others like it. In Italy, near Cassino, he had observed a similar position. The ground had appeared empty. The patrol had advanced. They had reached the tree line. As they moved beyond it, machine gun fire had opened from positions on the reverse slope. The patrol had withdrawn under fire. One man had been wounded. The patrol had returned and reported the enemy location. Artillery had engaged the position for 2 hours before infantry advanced. The staff sergeant had also observed empty positions that were truly empty. Near Montelimar in August, a ridgeline had appeared unoccupied. The patrol had advanced, confirmed the absence of enemy forces, and reported accordingly. The company had moved forward without opposition. The distinction between the two situations was subtle. It could not be reduced to a checklist. It involved the combination of terrain, timing, and the behavior of the ground itself. The ridgeline near Cassino had felt occupied despite appearing empty. The ridgeline near Montelimar had felt abandoned. The current ridgeline felt occupied. The staff sergeant could not have explained this assessment in tactical terms. The ground showed no definitive signs of enemy presence. The slope was typical of defensive positions, but that alone was not evidence. The lack of visible activity could indicate absence or discipline. The timing, 3 days after a German withdrawal, could support either interpretation. What the staff sergeant observed was the absence of incidental disturbance. No birds had taken flight from the ridgeline. No small animals had moved across the slope. The grass appeared uniform, as though it had not been walked through. In his experience, truly abandoned positions showed signs of minor disorder. Positions that were occupied and concealed showed signs of excessive order. He could not confirm this assessment without advancing. Advancing would provide definitive information, but it would also expose the patrol. If the ridgeline was occupied, the patrol would likely make contact before they could withdraw. If the ridgeline was empty, the patrol would confirm that fact and continue the mission. The staff sergeant decided that the risk of the first outcome exceeded the value of confirming the second. The patrol's mission was to identify enemy positions, not to confirm their absence. If the ridgeline was occupied, withdrawing now would allow him to report a suspected position. If it was empty, withdrawing would mean incomplete information, but the mission could be repeated or adjusted. He did not consult the other men. He did not explain his reasoning. He made the decision and acted on it. At 04:53 hours, the staff sergeant tapped the rifleman with the map on the shoulder twice. The rifleman nodded. The staff sergeant made a small hand gesture toward the west. The rifleman understood. He began to move backward through the grass, slowly, keeping low. The other two riflemen saw the movement and followed. The patrol withdrew in the same manner they had advanced. Movement was deliberate and controlled. No one stood. No one spoke. They moved in a staggered line, maintaining intervals of approximately 3 meters. The staff sergeant moved last, pausing frequently to observe the ridgeline behind them. At 02 hours, the patrol reached a shallow depression 100 meters west of the observation position. They paused. The staff sergeant scanned the ridgeline with binoculars one final time. No change was visible. He lowered the binoculars and gestured for the patrol to continue. At 08:25 hours, the patrol reached the edge of the second abandoned village. They moved through it quickly, using buildings for concealment. At 08:41 hours, they crossed a shallow stream and entered a wooded area. The staff sergeant allowed the patrol to rest for 5 minutes. No conversation occurred. Water was consumed. The map was reviewed briefly. At 08:47 hours, the patrol resumed movement west. The pace increased slightly now that they were farther from potential enemy positions. At 0934 hours, they reached a road junction that marked the boundary of the company's patrol sector. An outpost from the company recognized them and signaled them forward. At 0941 hours, the staff sergeant reported to the company commander. He described the route taken, the villages passed through, and the observation position. He stated that the ridge line 9 kilometers east appeared to be a likely defensive position, but that enemy presence could not be confirmed. He recommended additional reconnaissance or aerial observation before committing forces to advance. The company commander acknowledged the report. He asked whether the patrol had advanced to the tree line. The staff sergeant stated that they had not. The company commander asked why. The staff sergeant paused, then stated that the position appeared too well suited for an ambush, and that advancing would have risked contact without confirming useful information. The company commander nodded and dismissed the patrol. The company commander's daily report, submitted to battalion headquarters on October 12, included a summary of the reconnaissance patrol. The report stated that the patrol had observed terrain to a depth of 3 kilometers and identified a possible enemy defensive position on a ridgeline. The report noted that enemy presence was not confirmed. No recommendation for further action was included. The battalion operations officer reviewed the report and filed it with other intelligence summaries. No follow-up patrol was ordered. No aerial reconnaissance was requested. The ridgeline was noted on the situation map as a suspected enemy location, marked with a question mark. On October 13, the 3rd Infantry Division was ordered to halt its advance and consolidate positions. The operational focus shifted to the north, where another unit was encountering strong resistance. The sector containing the ridgeline remained static for 6 days. On October 19, a different regiment advanced through the area as part of a coordinated push toward the Vosges. The ridgeline was engaged with artillery before infantry moved forward. When troops reached the position, they found extensive fortifications on the reverse slope, including dugouts, machine gun nests, and pre-sighted firing positions. The positions were unoccupied. Evidence suggested they had been abandoned on October 18, 1 day before the attack. No after-action report connected the October 12 reconnaissance patrol to the October 19 findings. The staff sergeant's observation was not mentioned in any subsequent document. The company commander did not reference the patrol in his memoirs, written in 1972. The battalion operations log for October 12 contained no entry regarding the suspected enemy position. The patrol itself was recorded in the company journal as Recon Patrol 4 men departed 0245, returned 0941. No contact. No additional details were provided. The staff sergeant remained with Company E until the end of the war in Europe. He participated in the campaign through the Vosges, the crossing of the Rhine, and the advance into Germany. He was promoted to technical sergeant in December 1944. He was wounded by shrapnel near Nuremberg in April 1945 and evacuated to a field hospital. He returned to the United States in July 1945. After the war, he worked as a supervisor in a manufacturing plant in Ohio. He did not discuss the war frequently. In a 1978 interview conducted by a local historical society, he was asked about his most difficult decision during combat. He mentioned calling off an advance during a patrol in France, but provided no details. The interviewer did not pursue the subject. The staff sergeant died in 1989. The rifleman who had held the map was killed in action on November 3, 1944, during fighting near Saint DIA. He was 22 years old. His personal effects included the map used during the October 12 patrol. The map was returned to his family. It was donated to a museum in 1995. The ridgeline observed on October 12 was not marked on the map. The rifleman, who had carried the compass, completed his service and returned to Pennsylvania. He worked as a mechanic and raised a family. He attended unit reunions in 1965 and 1970. He did not mention the October 12 patrol in any recorded conversation. He died in 2001. The rifleman who had covered the rear was wounded in December 1944 during the Battle of the Bulge. He was evacuated and did not return to frontline duty. He was discharged in 1945 and returned to Texas. He did not participate in veteran organizations. He died in 1996. No letters or diaries from his service have been preserved. 4 men lay in the grass and watched a ridgeline. The ridgeline appeared empty. Doctrine required them to advance and confirm. They did not advance. The staff sergeant did not give the order. The patrol withdrew. They returned to their company. They reported what they had seen. No contact was made. No shots were fired. No casualties occurred. The ridgeline was marked on a map with a question mark. 6 days later, the division stopped advancing. 7 days after that, the ridgeline was found to have been fortified and then abandoned. The patrol's decision to withdraw was not mentioned in any report beyond the company journal. The staff sergeant's assessment was not documented. The reasoning was not explained. The outcome was not evaluated. The mission was recorded as complete. The patrol had observed the assigned sector and reported. The information was filed. The war continued. The grass where they lay was undisturbed within hours. The ridgeline remained on the map. The question mark faded as new information replaced old. The patrol was forgotten. No one asked why they had not advanced. No one recorded why they had withdrawn. The decision left no trace except in the fact that 4 men returned when doctrine suggested they should have continued forward. They withdrew before contact was made. The ridgeline remained quiet.